there's a feeling almost nobody talks about. It isn't depression. It isn't burnout. It isn't even loneliness. It's the strange, quiet moment when your life finally works. The job, the relationship, the place of your own. And instead of relief, something in you goes flat. A dull emptiness you can't explain and can't justify. We are the most comfortable, the most entertained, the most connected human beings who have ever lived. And quietly, persistently, many of us are miserable. Carl Jung saw this coming 100 years ago. In his clinic, he kept meeting the same strange kind of patient, not classically ill, no clear disorder, successful, rational, functional people who were completely empty inside. Jung wrote that a full third of his cases suffered from no nameable illness at all, but from the senselessness and emptiness of their lives. By the end of this, you'll understand exactly what modern life quietly stripped out of you. The missing thing you have almost certainly felt without ever having the words for it. This goes somewhere uncomfortable first, and then somewhere hopeful. Stay with me. Let's start with the paradox at the center of modern life. By every external measure, things have never been better. We have conquered problems that tormented our ancestors. Hunger, disease, distance, boredom. A person today lives with comforts a king could not have dreamed of 2 centuries ago. And yet depression and anxiety are climbing, not falling. The richest, safest societies on earth are full of people who feel that something essential is missing. This is the first thing to understand, and it is genuinely strange. Comfort is not the same as meaning. Solving the problem of survival did not solve the problem of how to live. Jung saw very early that material progress had quietly outrun something inside us and left a gap that no amount of comfort could fill. Think about what that means. For thousands of years, the central human problem was brutal and simple. Survive, find food, avoid death, make it through the winter. That problem organized everything, and it handed life a built-in purpose. Then, in an eye blink of history, much of the world solved it, and we discovered something no one had warned us about, that a life with survival removed does not automatically become a happy life. It becomes a life that suddenly has to answer a far harder question. Now, what is all of this for? Picture Daniel, an architect, 41, who spent 2 decades building exactly the life he was told to want. The income, the house with his own name on the deed, the marriage, the children, the corner office. And then one ordinary Tuesday evening, standing in his own beautiful kitchen while the dishwasher hums and the kids sleep upstairs, he is hit by a flat, quiet dread he cannot explain. Nothing is wrong, and somehow everything is. Why this matters for you right now. If you have ever achieved something you wanted and felt strangely hollow afterward, you were not being ungrateful. You were brushing up against the exact problem Jung spent his life trying to understand. So if comfort isn't the missing piece, what is? Jung's answer was unsettling. He believed modern people are unhappy because we have lost our connection to meaning itself, to the deep, symbolic layer of life that once held everything together. For almost all of human history, people lived inside a web of meaning, myth, religion, ritual, symbol, a sense of the sacred. These things answered the unbearable questions. Why am I here? What is my suffering for? What happens when I die? They located each small human life inside a vast, meaningful story. And this meaning was not something each person had to invent alone. It was carried by the whole community, woven into the calendar, marked by shared ritual, births, harvests, deaths, the turning of the year. To be born into such a world was to be handed, for free, an answer to why you mattered. Today, each of us is left to build that meaning privately, from nothing, and most of us were never even told that this was the task. And then, over a couple of centuries, that web quietly dissolved. We became rational, scientific, efficient, and disenchanted. The old story stopped feeling true. Jung did not argue we should force ourselves back into old beliefs, but he insisted we badly underestimated what we were losing. He even titled one of his books, Modern Man in Search of a Soul, because that is exactly what he saw walking into his office every day. People who had everything to live with and nothing to live for. Consider how strange our situation actually is. We may be the first large civilization in history with no shared answer to the question of what life is for. Why this matters now, the emptiness you sometimes feel is not a personal failure. It is partly the echo of a whole culture that misplaced its own meaning. And strangely, there is some relief hidden in that. A problem this old, this widely shared, is not a private defect to be ashamed of. It is a kind of human inheritance, and an inheritance can be understood and worked with. But how did we lose it? Jung pointed to something he found both magnificent and dangerous: the triumph of reason. The modern mind made a god of the rational, the measurable, the useful, and the rewards were real. Medicine, technology, freedom from 1,000 old terrors. But Jung warned that we paid a hidden price. In worshiping the rational half of the mind, we exiled the other half, the irrational, instinctive, symbolic, dreaming part, the part he called the unconscious, the part where meaning actually lives. We became, in his words, dangerously one-sided. We can explain everything and feel nothing. We have facts about the universe and no felt place within it. Jung put the danger sharply. Modern man is so proud of his reason and his will that he has become blind to how much of him is still run by forces he refuses to acknowledge. Think of Elena, a brilliant psychiatrist who can name every mechanism of her own unhappiness. She can diagram her childhood, cite the research, explain her own patterns in flawless clinical detail. And she feels nothing. She understands everything and can move toward none of it. That is one-sidedness. The thinking mind, cut off from the deeper waters that give thinking its weight. Jung used an image worth holding on to. The conscious, rational mind is a small, lit island, but beneath it stretches an entire ocean, the unconscious, older and far larger than the island, full of instinct, image, and ancient knowing. The modern world taught us to stand on the island and pretend the ocean isn't there. But the ocean is where dreams come from, where art comes from, where the very sense that life means something comes from. Cut the island off from the sea, and the island slowly goes sterile. Why this matters now? You cannot reason your way out of a meaning problem. The instrument that solved survival is the wrong instrument for the soul. There is another piece, and this one is sharper now than even in Jung's day. As the inner world emptied out, we poured ourselves into the outer one, into the surface. Jung had a word for the social mask we wear, the persona, the carefully managed version of ourselves we show the world. And he warned that the great danger of modern life is that we stop merely wearing the mask and start becoming it. We build entire lives around image, status, appearance, performance, the curated self, while the actual self, underneath, starves. We chase the next achievement, the next purchase, the next hit of approval, hoping it will fill the hole. It never does, because the hole is not on the surface. Think of Maya, 26, who photographs every good moment before she has finished living it, who feels a flicker of panic when a weekend goes undocumented, as if a joy that isn't posted somehow doesn't fully count. She has hundreds of friends on a screen and almost no one to call on a hard night. Consider how much of modern unhappiness is the exhausting work of performing a life instead of living one, managing how things look, comparing our insides to everyone else's outsides, and feeling more alone the more connected we appear. Social media did not invent this, but it poured fuel on it. We now spend hours a day comparing our unedited inner lives, the doubt, the boredom, the ordinary ache, against the polished highlight reels of everyone we have ever met. It is a contest no one can win, run at a scale no human nervous system was ever built for. And the more relentlessly we perform our happiness, the wider the gap grows between the life we show and the life we actually live. The persona was meant to be a tool. For many of us now, it has become a cage. Why this matters now? If you feel tired in a way sleep doesn't fix, ask how much of your energy goes into being seen and how little is left for actually being. Here's the part Jung most wanted people to understand. The need for meaning does not go away just because we stopped feeding it. It cannot be deleted. It can only be ignored. And what we ignore does not disappear. It returns. Jung believed that the spiritual hunger we refuse to face comes back in disguise, as the anxiety with no clear cause, the depression that doesn't match our circumstances, the compulsions we reach for to numb ourselves, the endless scrolling, the drinking, the overworking, the buying. These are so often just substitutes, frantic attempts to fill a meaning-shaped hole with anything else. Notice the pattern in your own reaching. The compulsions we cannot explain almost always spike in the empty moments. The silence after work, the long Sunday afternoon, the last minute alone before sleep. We have built a world where we never have to sit with that silence for even a few seconds. There is always something to reach for. But that silence is exactly where the deeper question used to find us. By never letting it speak, we keep the hunger fed just enough to ignore and just starved enough to ache. And on a larger scale, he saw something even darker. When a society loses its meaning, people grow desperate for it and become dangerously easy to capture. They will throw themselves into fanaticisms, ideologies, and mass movements that promise the certainty and belonging they have lost. Jung, who lived through exactly this, said it plainly. A human being cannot tolerate a meaningless life. We will take a destructive meaning over no meaning at all. Consider how much of what looks like our personal struggle, the numbing, the restlessness, the reaching for extremes, is really this one buried hunger, knocking from underneath, asking to be let in. Why this matters now? Your worst habits may not be the problem. They may be clumsy attempts to solve a much deeper one. So what did Jung actually offer? Not a return to the old certainties. He knew we cannot simply force ourselves to believe what we no longer believe. His answer was harder and more personal. If meaning can no longer be handed to us ready-made by the culture, then each of us has to do the difficult work of finding it within. He called this work individuation, the slow turning inward to reconnect with the unconscious, the symbolic, the parts of yourself the rational world told you to ignore. It means taking your inner life seriously again, paying attention to your dreams, your longings, the images and questions that move you. Asking not, how do I look, but what is mine to become? In practice, this can start almost embarrassingly small, protecting a little silence each day instead of filling every gap with noise, writing down the dream that would not leave you, noticing what genuinely moves you, what you envy, what you grieve, what you cannot stop thinking about, and treating those not as distractions, but as clues, following a question inward instead of scrolling away from it. None of this is grand. But Jung believed meaning is built precisely here, in these small acts of turning toward your own depths, instead of away. Jung believed meaning in the modern age is not discovered lying around in the world. It is created, painstakingly, by a person willing to descend into their own depths and come back with something real. This is why the emptiness, as painful as it is not only a wound, it is also a call. The dissatisfaction you feel is the part of you that knows there is more, refusing to settle for a life lived entirely on the surface. And the people who actually do this work tend to describe the same quiet shift. Nothing external changes overnight. Same job, same house, same problems. But the flat grayness begins to lift. Things start to matter again. A kind of aliveness returns that no purchase ever delivered, because it was never the sort of thing that could be bought. They stop waiting for the world to hand them a meaning and slowly become someone who carries one. Why this matters now? The hollowness is not the end of the story. It is the beginning of the only search that has ever actually mattered. So here's the question to sit with tonight. If comfort, success, and approval will never fill the emptiness, what would? What is the thing you secretly suspect your life is missing? The meaning you have been too busy or too afraid to go looking for. Sit with it. That discomfort is not your enemy. It is the door. Tell me in the comments. I read every one. And if this met you where you actually live, subscribe and stay close. This is the first step into something we'll explore together across the next videos: the modern crisis of the soul and what Jung believed we can do about it. In the next one, we go straight to the heart of it: the search for meaning in a world that lost its way. Until then, don't mistake the emptiness for the absence of life. It may be the part of you most alive,